Good morning. We are going to jump into the second part of Module 3 for this week, where in this part we're going to look at what frameworks are, and specifically what we're going to be looking at is a framework called jQuery Mobile. But I want to take a step back, and because there's some questions about jQuery. So, and how we're going to use jQuery. So jQuery itself is a library that was built to make JavaScript easier for you as the developer to access the functionality of JavaScript and the power of JavaScript. If you've had 240 or 246, you most likely wrote some JavaScript into web pages. And what you noticed is the JavaScript itself could have been a little clunky at times, where you had large function definitions and how you got to components was a little more difficult. And what jQuery does is it tries to simplify that so that you as a web developer can get to those components faster and more robustly, so that your programs work in a little more of a, for lack of a better term, modern way, and it makes things a little faster. Okay, so what jQuery is a library that is built on top of JavaScript, and I'll show you what that code looks like in just a minute, so you can see how we're going to use that code. Okay, and then in a few minutes we'll get to the framework of jQuery Mobile that we're going to use mostly for throughout the semester. So I don't want this to be, this isn't really a jQuery class. You don't need to, I'm not expecting you to jump into it and become a jQuery developer. I'm going to try to give you as much information as is necessary for each of our assignments, and I'm going to give you some resources to review that jQuery outside of class as well. We're going to focus more on utilizing the framework that's available to us as part of that. Okay, so let's take a look at what this looks like. I'm going to go into our NetBeans here and create a new HTML file. Where did you go? There you are. And I'm going to call this assignment 3. Oops, I don't need to add that. Assignment 3. So you should be able to see that. So simple HTML file for now. And what you probably have seen in the past is, if you are used to JavaScript, what you've probably seen in the past is code like scripts type equals text JavaScript, and then within this program you've got some functions. So maybe you want to do something when the window loads, and then inside here you do you need to find the div. Let's say we want to change the HTML for this div, and we say ID equals internal div, something like that. So in here, in JavaScript, this you know this is probably somewhat cumbersome, because you have to do document dot get element by ID internal div dot inner HTML equals something, right? I'm not sure this is going to work properly, but this is just a guess. So this is sort of how I would change when the page loaded. Instead of saying to do write content, it would say something here, right? So when I loaded this web page up, there may be errors here, but let's see what I can come up with. Excuse me, bit of a cold right now. Let's see, where did you go? So if I go to collier.lib, so yeah, it didn't run properly. And why was that? No errors there. Just didn't find anything there. So you can tell that with JavaScript, things can get a little bit kludgy in how to get things to work. It gets a little bit problematic, and you're trying to find bugs. I didn't get any errors in my JavaScript console here, so I'm not sure what's wrong just yet. This is just and I'm just hacking this out as a guess. I probably would need to make sure to load something on the body, that kind of thing. Whereas jQuery simplifies this quite extensively. So what you'll see with jQuery is that, try to find our little program here. Sorry, just one sec. Sorry, bit of a cold right now. So what you'll see is like this can be a little bit funky in trying to get this to work. So what we're going to do is if we change this to a jQuery function, and how do we use jQuery, and what is jQuery? So like I said, jQuery is a library that's built on top of JavaScript. And what I want to do is we'll go out to, I'll show you how this looks here. If you go to code.jquery.com, that should do it. So this code.jquery.com. This is where the libraries are hosted, and you'll notice a lot of content here. We'll come back to this section of jQuery Mobile in just a moment, but you'll notice the core jQuery is at version 2, but earlier IE is not supported. We'll focus on 1 for now. So these are libraries for JavaScript that live on top of JavaScript, and we can go into and see all the versions of it as it has grown essentially, and you'll see the latest version up here is 1.10. So what this looks like, if I click into this jQuery code, this library, you'll notice that it looks just like JavaScript, because it is, right? This is a JavaScript function. These are JavaScript libraries that are built into it, and it just gives us a little bit of a different viewpoint. So if we want to use this, and then minified is just all the white spaces removed, so it's a little uglier to look at, but a little bit more efficient to use for us. So what I want to do is I want to copy the URL of this, and it's always a good idea to either pull this from jQuery.code or from Google APIs where it's hosted as well, in order to make sure you have the latest version. It's totally okay and possible to download this source code. You could save it into your local folder and include it that way. But that just means that you have to stay on top of any changes and change that library. So I'm going to use the minified version, and I'm going to grab the URL here. I'm going to copy the link address, and then go back into my NetBeans and my source code up here. And what I'm going to do is pull another script source equals, and I'm going to copy that URL into it. Okay. So that's how I've saved. I'll just end it like this to make sure it's compliant here. So that's how I've saved my I've included now jQuery 1.10. That's the quickest way to include that jQuery. Okay. So now we have jQuery in our program. If I go back and I load in, if I load that up, reload this, you'll notice no errors in my Java console, no content, but no errors either. So then if I come back up here, I'm not sure why I didn't get any content there. Why am I not? Okay, my apologies for the pause there. This was throwing my code off, so be sure to close this properly. I was using the sort of old void method here, and that's why I had this warning. It didn't like that. I needed the script there. So this works this way then. So what this is in the jQuery, you've got this function and you're just pulling the document and then you're saying ready. So instead of having to have a larger function, that's really all you have to do to get that document, to understand that you've got access to the document at that point. And then within that, instead of saying, document.get internal or get element by ID and figuring all that out, all I have to do is call a function and tell it what I'm using within that function. So this is by ID here, and then the text, and then that'll work. So you'll notice I'll come over here and I'll get my code there. Okay, so that's how jQuery works, and I'm going to provide you with a few more resources so you can review that and go into more detail on how you might extend that use of jQuery. Okay, so what we're going to do now is jump into using the jQuery mobile framework that's built on top of jQuery. So while jQuery itself is a library that's built onto JavaScript, and we're going to go through this quite a bit. So this is just really introductory jQuery, and we're going to keep building on this that knowledge. Now we're going to introduce using jQuery mobile on top of that. So going back to that list of code, you'll notice here's all the versions of jQuery core. We'll come back and look at jQuery mobile. So jQuery mobile is a framework, and what a framework is, a software framework, is a set of tools that are built so that you are designed so that you as a web developer can rapidly put out content, dynamic content, without having to be too concerned about really core look and feel things like how a button looks, how you style buttons. It sort of wraps all of the styling and functionality of a core system into one. So you get the basics and the baseline of that system into your software. And then you don't have to sort of reinvent the wheel every time. It gives you that framework to build it out, and we'll see sort of how that works as we'll go through this piece. So again, same idea, we're at the same code set, so we're going to include that framework. The nice thing about the jQuery mobile framework is it's a simple framework as far as how to include it in your code. It doesn't require any installations on top of your actual web server. It's included the same way jQuery is. So if we go look at the same kind of thing here, you'll notice jQuery mobile. Now you'll see a lot more jQuery type code within this framework. The other piece of a framework is the theme of it. So you'll notice the theme here, you get a lot of CSS, and this is kind of ugly, minified CSS. But you notice that this is a big part of it, and and we'll see that as we go through. We can build quite a bit on top of that. So what we want to do is we want to include our jQuery mobile framework into our source. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the link address here, go back into my project, and then next to my jQuery, which has to be there, we're building on top of that, so we still need our jQuery. We're going to include our jQuery mobile framework. So now we have jQuery and we have jQuery mobile. That's not the last piece we need. We also need the theme in order to get the look and feel. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to copy the link address, but you'll notice this is CSS. So now what we need to do is include this CSS file as a style sheet. So You should be familiar with this code with how to include a style sheet. You've seen this before. Oops, source equals href equals. Okay. So there's our style sheet inclusion. So now we've got jQuery included, we've got jQuery mobile included, and the theme that gives us our look and feel for jQuery mobile. Okay. So the other piece, and we may have seen this before. We'll come back to that. So this gives us our is going to give us a mobile look and feel to our page. Okay, so for now, I'm going to remove this script because we're not going to be using it. We're not going to be doing any scripting just yet. But so we're going to go into our actual page. So the first thing we want to do is give our page, use our framework to determine what our page looks like. Okay, so the thing about a framework is you have to follow some conventions as to how the page structure looks. And the first thing about the jQuery mobile framework is what's called a data role. So each div, as we build out our content is going to be built out within a div structure throughout the page. So most components of our page are going to be within a div divider, a div component within our HTML. And we need to give those things a data role. So the data role tells jQuery and jQuery mobile what this div is, what role this div is going to play within our structure. So the top level one is page, and we need to give it an ID. We'll call it main for now, and that's fine. And then so there's our first page, our first div. And so come back to our HTML page, and you see nothing's there, but it's got a little bit of a gray background instead of a pure white background. That's coming from the theme, that's coming from the style. Okay, so the next thing we want to put in here is a simple page header. So we'll do a div, another div, and we need another data role, and we'll call this header. And then within that header, we need to give ourselves a page, and we'll say first jQuery mobile page, and that header. So H1 is just a header definition, but again, we're within our page structure, we're defining that this is the header of our data role. That's the data role of this div, is that it's a header. So when we go back to our page here, you notice we get this black header with our first jQuery mobile page. So we defined it so that it looks this way. And if I shrink this down into more of a mobile size, you'll see how that kind of plays along. So notice that we didn't look at any styling ourselves. We didn't do anything really special there. What we're doing is we're following this framework. By assigning this data role, it's giving us our theme for our header. It's taking care of all of the classifications and all that stuff by defining it as a data role. And then if we take this and now say we've got a content section, data role equals content. Now anything within this div structure is going to be part of our content section. Okay, and now the next thing we want to do is that, if we go and look at this real quick again, so nothing changed, there's nothing actually in there. If I put some let's say a paragraph here of this is our first content, you'll notice we've got a different font, a little bit of a cleaner font, some margining and padding around this content. That's because the theme has given us that. We've been given that as part of the theming within our framework. Okay, and let's say I want to add a link here. If I add a link, let's say an ahref, I'm not going to send it anywhere. I'm just going to leave it empty. See what that looks like. Now I've got a link here, but within the framework gives us this option to say, well, if we want this link, we want to make it look more mobile, let's call this a button. The data role for this component within our page is going to be a button. So it turns that into it styled that link to look like a button. So that's where jQuery Mobile is really powerful, in that we don't have to worry about figuring out how to make these styles look nice, because it handles it and it gives us this look and feel that we're really looking for. It makes that very useful. So very, very nice for us. Okay. So that's really just a real quick introduction into jQuery and jQuery Mobile and how we build out this structure. Your assignment for this week is going to be, let me bring up the rubric so I can read it off here. Oops, is that it? Excuse me. So you're going to be using a little bit of the material that I provided in the content section, and let me pull that up so I can review that real quick. Where are you? Just one sec, I just need to find this, where this is at. So part of the content that you're provided this week is from a book called jQuery Mobile Up and Running, and in Chapter 2, I'm providing Chapter 2 here. There's a really basic page that just gives you some links and a layout, and it's basically called, they call it the page. You end up with a footer, and let me show you what that looks like here. So then if we've got our content here, you know, a normal app will have a header and a footer. So we might want to put some a little bit smaller content in here and say this is our footer. Come back and look at our page, and now we've got a footer here based on that styling. Let's see what happens if we change this to H4. Does it give us a different size? No, it stays the same for now, so no worries. So that structures our page in that way. So what you're going to do in this assignment is come up with the page that's provided in Chapter 2 of jQuery Mobile Up and Running. It's a very simple page that you actually end up with two pages. You're going to link into page 1 and page 2. And the interesting thing about this structure with jQuery Mobile is in a lot of cases you end up with you notice we gave this our main page. We can actually end up with this structure in one actual HTML file. We don't need multiple files in a lot of ways, in a lot of cases. So I may define a second page here. So by defining this as a data role, and I'm going to call this page 2. by defining this second data role page 2, I don't need to have a second HTML file. It gives us the opportunity to keep all of our content within one page, because in the mobile space you're trying not to put too much content there, right? You're trying to limit how much is actually happening within that page, and then I'll just build this out the same way we did on page 1 or in the main page. And let's say we have another button. Let's say we go this button is going to take us oops, where am I? Right. So this button will take us, let's say, back to the main page. Data role equals button. Content go to main. Okay. And let's say this button takes us to page 2. So you notice what we're doing is anchoring where this button goes down to this content based on this ID. So this link here has to tie back to page 2, this ID here, and this has to tie back to this page here. So it's really how that structure works. So if I refresh this page, we refreshed our page, so now we would go to main. This is a link, goes to page 2, go to main. So very simple code to get 2 full mobile looking pages and going back and forth through them, just based on the fact that we're utilizing this framework on top of this jQuery library and assigning these data roles. So each component has a data role within that. So your assignment for this week is essentially to recreate this 2-page structure that's defined within a simple 2-page structure that's within the jQuery mobile up and running. Okay, so that's what we're covering in this module, and if you have any questions, please feel free to ask and find me on the forums or email, and I'll see you online. Thank you very much.